well, yeah, to begin with, well, a few words of thanks. Yeah, as you may imagine, it is a special pleasure for me to have another opportunity to talk about a book that, well, gave me so much to think about and took me years to write. Yeah, well, today my pleasure is doubled by being able to talk about it with my friend Matteo Bortolini, who played, maybe you don't know, but he played a key role in the years leading to the final draft, of the book. And I'm also grateful, of course, to my institution, to Massimo Leone, for asking me to present the book only a few weeks after its publication. So, well, I don't have much time, so I start off with the key question I'd like to ask today, and what happens is my question when you rewrite a book of yours in a language different than yours. Well, first of all, as you can easily imagine, my book is a sort of overview of a big conversation on a very big topic, secularization. So, well, the first problem you have to deal with is the urge for aggiornamento, of course. So, I mean, the need and desire to improve and update the book. For example, think about the bibliography. I'm thinking about the fact that, for example, Habermas in 2019 published his monumental Auch eine Geschichte der Philosophie. Or, well, David Martin died in the meantime. Or, well, a lot of things happened, of course, in 3 years since I published the book in Italian. Well, it is a relief for me to be able to say that the book has stood the passage of time, or at least so it seems to me. In fact, I didn't feel the need to change much in the various chapters. And so I can say that this, for me, is an evidence that my view of the secularization debate was well established by the time I wrote the book in Italian. So what is the key gain that I had in translating the book? Well, I think it comes from another angle, and from the fact that you never understand the text so fully, so thoroughly, as when you translate it into another language. Well, I'm not speaking here only of the obscure, badly crafted sentences. There were some, of course, but rather about the major thought trains underlying my long argument. So I guess that I have now a better sense of what I wanted to achieve with the book. So to begin with, take for example the urge to oversee the debate. Now, that seems to me to be a direct consequence of a true, genuine need for sense-making. In other words, when I wrote the book, I was simply very curious, and my questions about secularization were very basic. So my question was questions such as, what is going on there? Why are they arguing? What is the bone of contention? So, and well, an important aspect of this fact is that such a need for sense-making is different, although not totally independent of the need for fact-checking, which is also a key element in the new secularization debate. And this goes under different questions. So, for example, if we ask, are we secularized or not? Or are we secularized as much as we thought we were? So these are different questions from the earlier ones. And it looks to me clear now that the discussion whether what was challenged in the new secularization debate was a thesis or a theory, a full-fledged theory, or a theorem, as Blumenberg famously said, or a doxa, as my friend Matteo Bortolini thinks or taught me to see the problem, or even, as I called it once or twice in the book, a strange construction, a theoroid. Well, this fact, of course, to decide whether what was challenged in the new secularization debate was a thesis, a theory, a theorem, a doxa, a theoroid, was crucial for understanding what lies behind for example, my distinction between deconstruction of secularization and maintenance of secularization. So what I had in mind was precisely the fact that what is deconstructed, was it maintained in the new secularization debate, is a theorem, okay, is maybe even a theoroid of secularization. And this leaves room, after you decide whether what is challenged is a thesis, a theory, a theorem, for a 30-60-degree debate on what is the reality underlying the notion of secularization. So first of all, you want to know, and I think sense-making has precisely to do with that aspect of the question. You want to know what is challenged in the new secularization debate. Yes, another interesting fact that I learned from rewriting the book has to do with the familiar aspect of our job. So how can you navigate safely between these two different horns, sense-making and fact-checking in this field? How much do you have to know to escape the notorious impostor syndrome? Well, with the benefit of hindsight, it looks very clear to me that in the beginning, I did feel the need to neutralize as much as possible the effort to diffuse the burden. Yeah. So when I asked, for example, Matteo, let's write the book together. Well, you know so much about the empirical side of the question. Let me concentrate on the framework. Oh, when I thought to ask someone else, let's write the book together. You know so much about secularism, for example. Let me focus on secularity. Well, I wanted to get rid of this burden, of course, that is so big. But with the benefit of hindsight, I now see that this wasn't a feasible option. And why was it bound to fail in the end? Well, my claim is precisely that in order to oversee this kind of global conversation, what you need to pursue is not an impossible neutrality, objectivity, or comprehensiveness, but a more modest personal impartiality, even-handedness, fairness. I mean, what I did, I think what you can do when you want to oversee this kind of debate is to blaze a personal trail and moving through your readings. The more the readings, of course, the better, but you don't need to deal with every detail as if you were producing an all-knowing, omniscient, and all-seeing encyclopedia. So, well, I cannot go into the details of my considered choice in favor of this idea of reflective equilibrium now today, but there is an obvious connection between the idea of doing justice to as many reasons as possible for or against the secularization thesis, theorem, doxa, and my view of the main task of philosophy today, that is building bridges, straddling gaps, surveying and charting as far as possible the space of reason. So yes, the post-secular city was and is a genuine philosophical book, even though I do nothing but cross-disciplinary boundaries in it. by bringing into play in turn sociologists, anthropologists, historians, theologians, and so forth. If I can venture a last self-interpretation, the right label for this kind of investigation may be a philosophical narrative. The book actually tells an intricate story about a paradigm shift in our understanding of the fate of human religious past in the Neuzeit, the New Age, the Modern Age. It is, moreover, if I'm allowed an inside joke, it is a travel story. The story of the 7 mountains. There are indeed 7 major peaks in my personal journey. Oh, who read the book know that I moved from the debate between Blumenberg and Löwit. Then I moved to David Martin, Charles Taylor, Hans Joas, Talal Assad, Marcel Gaucher, Jürgen Habermas, and finally the already mentioned Gianni Vattimo. So there are these 7 mountains in my travel story, my personal but non-subjective story, the philosophical story I tell in this book. And what is crucial in this travel journey is that these peaks, these summits of thought, enable the reader, I hope, to contemplate the same landscape and so outline a reliable map of the entangled space of reasons that saturate this field of knowledge and lie beneath our contemporary hot debate on secularization. So, to conclude, what do you see from the top of these mountains? So, if this metaphor functions for you as well, does the result match the effort? Was it really worth it? Because of course it was hard. Yeah. Well, everything considered, I think so. What you see, what you envision, what you envisage after being on the top of these peaks is not so much what is called secularization, but after rewriting the book, my favorite term now is secular maybiness. So it's not secularization, it may be secularness, but my favorite option is secular maybiness. In a, well, very few words, secular maybiness is the product of a major cultural, local innovation, European innovation, the rise of the secular option. So the term, the word, to cut a long story short, designates a bundle of reactions and responses that such huge momentous historical change triggered in different areas and fields of the modern world. It is a complicated, multi-layered development full of very subtle philosophical conundrums. So yes, we can reasonably claim that the new secularization debate offers a fruitful point of entry to what I dare to call the spiritual situation of our time. So yes, well, a good name for it, for me, is secular maybiness. Well, so okay, so rewriting the book in another language was a lot of fun, after all. But having said that, do we really need the concept of secularization or not? That is the final question in my book, is still there. Now, as I said, well, maybe we can get rid of the word. Secularization probably is not what we need, but yeah, I would venture to say that we need a concept like secular maybiness to make sense of the great transformation. And such is the piece of contemporary human reality, it's my conclusion, that the new secularization debate was and is still trying to put in perspective, to have in view. This is definitively what I better understood by rewriting my book in a different language and well. And I want to thank again Matteo for what he will say about my effort. Thank you very much.
So, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm sorry, I had to put my hats on because there are some workers upstairs. Paolo, thank you for inviting me and pushing me to reread the book. Um, so, uh, as almost no one knows here, I'm a sociologist, but not really a sociologist of religion as much as a sociologist of knowledge and the production of expert knowledge. And my point of view is a bit eccentric, so to say, because I've been studying a lot people studying religion. So in a sense, my empirical object is not religious people. There are more or less of them, but intellectuals and people reflecting on religion and politics in the West in the last 2 centuries. And so my personal point of view was one of reconstructing and thinking about this kind of debates. So in a sense, my reflection on Paolo's book, but in general on the question is a bit eccentric with respect with the overall discourse on secularization. But just to prepare to this discussion, I went out and I looked for the most recent sociological papers that I could find about secularization numbers and empirical proofs of secularization, because we're always looking for that, right? And one thing that really amazed me is that in the last couple of years, that is after Paolo's original book came out, there were at least 2 articles that said that the 2 big so-called counterexamples of secularization theory, that is the US and Italy, are not really counterexamples, and that it can be demonstrated quite clearly that each cohort in each country is less religious than the preceding one. So, and even in those 2 countries which were somehow considered as some obstacles to a full realization of a theory of secularization, we have problems with that. What I want to say is, my first point is when I read Paolo's book, I obviously knew most of the authors that he talks about, and sometimes his interpretations are so good, so clever, that things that escaped me before now were really clear. So I was very happy to read the book from that point of view. But my reading was gave me a sense of how the 2 discourses, the one of the social sciences and the one of, I would say, professional philosophy, and I will come back to that because I think the key to the whole discourse is that professional philosophy, and how the 2 discourses of the social sciences and of professional philosophy were and had been very far one from the other, even when, and even in those cases, for example, in Charles Taylor's case or Ansioa's, where the individuals themselves are very well versed in sociology and philosophy, and have say kind of double expertise. So why I'm saying this, because the sense that it is that even in the hands of a very analytical and very good philosopher as Paolo's, it seems that the levels of the discussions are always intermeshed, so that they different levels crisscross each other all the times. And even when you try to, even those authors who try to disentangle the different levels, so you have a very, very low basic level where secularization is just an empirical phenomenon. Is it there? Is it not? Let's count people going to the mass and things like that. Or on a very different level, are religious institutions still influential in different countries and societies and cultures and civilizations? And then the more abstract ideational level, when you go Heidegger style, bringing secularization to metaphysics and being and whatever. So these discourses seem so detached, so I would say that it will look almost impossible to put a bridge, to build a bridge between those. Okay, so that is something I was trying to think this morning. Okay, I was trying to uh, I was doing this was kind of a like taking an LSD pill for me. So I was trying how to translate Heidegger into the items for sociological research, because I know I'm saying something very strange now, but how, without this kind of translation, how can you bridge the different levels of the discussion? So, so that it is a single discussion, it is a single attempt at seizing the meaning, the facts and the meaning of a transformation that goes for at least a couple of centuries. Otherwise, we only have the same words for completely different things and completely different discourses and completely different networks of people talking of something that is very, very uh, uneasily and very weakly connected. And my impression is that and 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 I don't think that the different discourses could really be connected. Um, so, and this is a kind of an answer when Paulo says, do I have to study the empirical stuff in order to be able to understand the more philosophical stuff? Do I have to, how can I connect the one and the other? And I think my final answer is they cannot be connected, in fact. And I'm always more and more convinced of that. And so I was thinking this morning, why is that? Why does it work like that? And 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 then the hypothesis that I have as a sociologist of knowledge and knowledge production is the professionalization of disciplines and the professionalization of philosophy. So the very fact that being a philosopher in the 19th and the 20th century is very, very different from being a philosopher in other moments of the history of the world. Um, I don't know if I can explain this quickly, but um, so the idea is I would say an almost Pierre Bourdieu-like idea of the creation of a philosophical field as a professional endeavor, as a a job for people work within institutions uh, where they exchange their ideas and their text in a very tight and well-connected and professionalized circuit of journals and publishers and meetings and things like that. So, for example, Nietzsche won't belong to this, for example, okay, but Charles Taylor would, and almost all the other um, authors in Paolo's book would. And so, uh, does that change the way we do philosophy? I think it changes it. Uh, and it changes the way we do philosophy in many ways, but one of the ways is that it creates the need for a competition of ideas that is based on a continuous attempt at creating something more original and more extreme, in a sense. And then when you create something more extreme and more original, then some others would come and try to combine the pieces, and then the very um, uh, the very shape of the field, the very process of a formation of a field of professional philosophy creates the need for two or three or maybe four strong positions on the extremes and another three or four trying to mediate between the extreme ones. And what I'm trying to say is that we cannot only look at the play of ideas as the authors were just reflecting on some uh, real or imagined fact of life. Are people more or less religious? Is religion doomed? Is religion in decline? But they mostly have to take into account the fact that the field is always already populated by other theories, other theorems, other hypotheses, and other people saying other things. And so, can you look at them? Just to use the metaphor of the mountains, you can never look at the mountains one by one. You have a kind of a chain of mountains, and you have to look at the chain as a whole, a configuration of different elements that only get their significance and their meaning from the configuration itself and not in themselves. So what I want to say is that what I think is that a big part of the debate is due to the fact that positions have to be taken, and positions have to be taken in opposition to other positions in the professional philosophical field. And I mean, that's the same for any autonomous professionalized discipline. Okay. And so a lot of things um, would change its very meaning and change its so the question is not, are you reflecting on some kind of outside reality or maybe not there, but the point is, who are you debating with? And that's why I think in a sense, the first chapter is the one I like the most, right? So when you see a dialogue, or when you see different position takings of different intellectuals that try to talk to each other. So yeah, and so for example, let's say so you remember, Paolo, many years ago, I translated into Italian a book that was the transcription of a dialogue about secularization and religion and blah, blah, between Charles Taylor and Jürgen Habermas and Cornel West and Judith Butler. Okay. In that book, you had a kind of like a stage play of different positions of intellectuals that were called to that dialogue as the representatives of some specific positions, okay? Not only as Jürgen Habermas or Charles Taylor, the very famous philosopher, but as a very good typical carrier of, say, a kind of a Enlightenment position or a more communitarian position, a more neo-Aristotelian position, or whatever, right? So my conviction at this point should be that this kind of reflections, the kind of work that Paolo did, should go more and more in the direction of reconstructing this small networks of positions in dialogue. Because the interesting thing is that not only that the different philosophies and the different ideas are created in opposition to other ideas, but they cannot be too much in opposition, because in that moment, no dialogue would be possible between the positions. And what is typical of our reflection or understanding of philosophy is not finding the truth, but continuing the dialogue in a sense, right? And so what I think would be more and more interesting is to try to tackle this kind of problems in a way that shows you how groups of position are made and remade and translated through time. Because the last thing that I want to say is that one of the very interesting things about the debate on secularization is that in this case we have 3 or 4 basic positions, and we always find the same 3 or 4 basic positions, but in different translation time after time. It's like say a classic theatrical text that is made and remade and brought into play in different historical moments, in different situations, and each one of these comes from all the others. It's like a continuous dialectic, but where the positions are really always the same. You always find the same positions, and they are different because they are translated and they undergo a dialectic process of making and remaking the positions. And so you see what is the difference between obviously your book is a kind of as a kind of an I would say argumentative tone, but what I'm trying to say is that also an argumentative kind of discourse can be constructed not on peaks, but on groups and networks, and also in a diachronic way in showing how the reciprocal understanding of different positions and different theories and different philosophies move as groups through time. And so you can recognize how the same, say, for example, the same anti-secularization thesis goes through many incarnations as her own opponents change through time by way of dialogue and dialectic, so to say. So that would be a very different way to understand how ideas move through time, in a sense. Yeah, so the rereading of the book mostly gave me gave me the idea, in fact, of writing another book about how to write and how to understand this kind of movement of ideas through time, because the in the end, when you end your reading of your book, you say, okay, but is secularization there or not? But that is not the question, the right question. The right question is, why do these ideas persist and change at the same time through time in a say time span of, I would say, 150 years, and in the end we are still discussing these matters, but in completely changed terms. Has it to do with historical events? Has it, I think not. Has it to do with a community of dialogue that moves through time? I think this is the right answer. So it should be studied as such, as a phenomenon.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Matteo. Well, as you can clearly see, and if you want to join the conversation, of course, this is the right moment to do it, that there, yeah, the question is, what do you expect from someone or from you dealing with a topic like this, secularization? If you simply listen to someone talking about this concept, this phenomenon, secularization, what do you expect from people dealing with scientific tools with this concept? Of course, it's not just epistemological or methodological question, but it's precisely an attempt at making sense of the position, the role this concept, this word plays in your favorite explanation of some important issues in our life, of course. So yeah, and it's there. I don't think there is a perfect solution, perfect way of dealing with this problem. But of course, mine was it really a journey, because of course we started together with Matteo planning a book that didn't make it to the end, of course, but I made it to the end, but I made it to the end in a very tentative way. And it's so this open-ended way of investigating a field or a question is so adventurous, is a very interesting aspect of our job. And so if you want to join the conversation and tell us what do you expect from someone dealing with secularization today, that would be very interesting, great for us, of course, because yes, rewriting La Città Secolare into another language, into English, was exactly as I said before, and very interesting exercise in self-understanding. And I think that now I see all the nuances, the differences that Matteo talked about much more clearly than I saw while I was writing the book. So it's a very interesting side of our job, that how it works for us. It's so you do something like the agents in history. You only partly know what you're doing, but then you understand, and it's a very interesting lesson what you learn from this on this journey. So it's if you want to join the conversation, yeah, the floor is open for anybody.
Yeah, Paolo, maybe this change of language, of course, implied a reconsideration of the lexicon used and a reevaluation of its meanings and connotations. And but I wonder whether the most dramatic change isn't a change of readership and a change of audience. You are potentially talking to completely different people. And so is this something that you have interiorized, taken into account, and modified? Not the content of the book, but the idea of how it will be received, because its circulation is potentially much wider and touches contexts that are probably very difficult to even foresee, and quite different from the context that presumably characterizes the readership that received the book in Italian.
Yes, of course, there is a side of the question that is simply funny, is the fact that some of the authors that I analyze in the book are alive. For example, Charles Taylor, Hansi Oas, or Jürgen Habermas, of course, that I criticize in the book. So of course, it's so when I so the attention was very high when I had to choose the right English words for what I chose in while I was writing the book in Italian. So yes, the style is much more controlled, and this is well, you can expect that, of course, from translating a book into language that almost everybody can read. But the interesting side is that, in a sense, it is easier to write that kind of book in English, because some of the words, like secularity, for example, are easier, of course, to use in English, or secular, for example. And it's easier, of course, if you have to distinguish between laicità and secolarità, and you have to introduce a new term, and you don't know. For example, when I translated into Italian A Secular Age of Charles Taylor, of course, well, I used l'età secolare instead of un'età secolare. Why did I choose l'età secolare instead of un'età secolare? Because, of course, now that with the benefit of hindsight, I know that it was a mistake, of course, but it's a lot easier. On the other hand, of course, it's the question posed by Matteo is a heavy burden. Yes, now that I have to explain to a larger audience why it sounds so anachronistic, this effort, this sense-making effort, this idea of producing an overview of a debate that is clearly divided in different smaller scientific communities. And so, yes, it's a lot of fun, of course. It's a lot of fun because I think it's one of the most rewarding aspects of writing a book on secularization is that secularization is connected to so many interesting philosophical problems that it's a lot of fun to work on secularization, and starting from the methodological issues of what are you doing? Are you telling a story? Are you producing a theory? What are you doing exactly while you talk about secularization? And And when you talk about Max Weber, are you talking about a philosopher, a sociologist? Is the same kind of sociologist that you meet today when you, well, have a conversation, of course, with the community of sociologists that Matteo was speaking about, of course? These are very interesting questions. And then you move to a lot of problems, of course, when you use secularization as a transitive or intransitive word. Of course, for example, for Blumenberg, secularization was the translation of something religious into secular terms, but for a lot of people, secularization is simply a fact in the word, intransitive fact, then religion disappears and doesn't turn into something else. So, and then you have David Martin, for example, a lot of interest in this aspect of the local trajectories of secularization, and then the question, what does it mean that history, human history, has so many local trajectories? Isn't there a universal human history? And then you have Chostera, interesting answer, and well, a lot of very, 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 very interesting philosophical questions that crop up when you deal with a topic like secularization. So yes, now it's a very interesting moment, of course, because I'm looking forward to responses. If there will be, of course, will be a lot of fun to have a conversation with people who have very different ideas. Now, if I'm allowed, just another very short thought about the book. I reviewed an article yesterday about Agamben's take on coronavirus pandemics. And the very conservative author who wrote this piece claimed that Agamben was right in telling the Catholic Church that it's too mundane, it's too secular, and that the Catholic Church failed during the pandemics because it wasn't Catholic enough. Well, that's a very interesting question, of course, because how do you review such an article? Of course, it's a scientific, of course, it's a very good article, well written, but there is a claim precisely at the core of this article that Agamben's position on the pandemics and other position of the pandemics are incommensurable. Okay, well, that is a very interesting philosophical question. Can we say that there are incommensurable positions when you deal with a biological phenomenon like pandemics? Well, yes and not. So it's a very, very interesting question. But my take, my idea, my claim is that this question arises from reality, from our world, and not from a specific scientific community. And that is the question I'm most interested in. And secularization for me looks a lot like that sort of question. I think there has to be the possibility to oversee the issue, the problem, the bundle of questions connected with this phenomenon that is, and this has to be compatible with the fact that is unquestionable that our scientific community is divided up in small communities that usually don't speak to each other. But there has to be someone or, some, I don't know if I would call it a discipline or whatever, but philosophy for me is precisely that sort of translation engine that build bridges and try to make a connection between these questions that continually arise from the world outside, from reality, and yes, and that we try to answer, although we know that the positions from which we are talking look incommensurable sometimes. But I think the effort is worth. Yeah, yeah. I see a
Thank you,
couple of
Paolo.
hands. Oh,
Yeah, Boris, I think, was
Boris.
the first one. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Paolo. Thank you very much, Matteo. This is really interesting, or an interesting conversation. I have a question, first to Paolo, but then in a sense also to Matteo, because Matteo, you talked about the fact that you found 2 articles in the recent sociological literature that claimed to show that the traditional counterexamples, United States and Italy, are not really counterexamples. And what I want to ask and say is it has something to do with that as well. So what happens very often to me is when I open a book on or read an article from the fields of sociology of religion, let's say on religious diversity or on religion and digital media, or on, let's say, religion and X, yeah, is that on the first page of the introduction, you read something like the following. It has by now become absolutely obvious that secularization theory has failed. Yeah, so and you read this again and again and again and again. And it is as if those authors need the secularization theory bashing on the first, like literally in the first sentences of their books, in order to somehow legitimize their own research, which regards an object which, of course, many people would say, well, is losing significance. Social, societally, and so on. Of course, there are others who say that's not the case, and so on and so on. I'm just always amazed, and I must say by now very often also annoyed by having to read these first sentences of introductions to these books or articles and so on. So it even has happened even sometimes that I lost patience right there on the first page of the introduction and didn't read the book or didn't read the article. So now my question for Paolo, from what you say, I mean, you mentioned or you emphasized the complexity of the entire debate, and then Matteo added this structural complexity as debates between, let's say, on a theoretical level, philosophical level, and an empirical level. And so we have something really, really difficult to get one's head around here on the level of the phenomenon that we're talking about, or the phenomena that we're talking about. So from your perspective, what would you say to people who start their books or articles with such big declarations? And then I would like to put the same question to Matteo, actually. Thank you.
Yeah, sounds very rhetorical, but to me it's simply the evidence that the paradigm shift has occurred. But in the humanities, the paradigm shifts are like that precisely, are more a matter of when you shift the burden of argument. So now people who want to claim that secularization as the sort of doxa that Matteo recently wrote about in a very interesting article that we're going to publish in a special issue of La Società degli Individui, where he claims that in a very convincing way that there was no theory when the opinion of most scholar was that the secular religion was in the clear decline, and in Europe, in the West, and in the world. There was no clear theory, of course. There was precisely this widespread sense that in terms of human history, we were living a stage where religion was not a very important causal factor in human affairs. So, but that is not very informative, I think. So that is the reason why in my book I try to look as much as possible to the very interesting attempts to maintain the secularization thesis or theorem in the new scientific scenario, the new landscape. So, and I think that, well, for example, Habermas has a lot of very interesting things to say, and he stays within the, I think, yeah, the boundaries of a classical standard secularization, well, thesis, yes, insight, intuition, yes. So yes, I think it's simply an evidence that a paradigm shift has occurred in the debate, in the debate about religion, especially about spirituality. So if it's annoying for you, of course, it's just part of our well, let me call it circus. Yeah, it's just part of our job. What we usually don't pay much attention to, but of course, so you simply have to say, I know, first of all, I know that now everybody thinks that, and I accept that, and then I have something to say, and I move forward, and that is my way of understanding that sort of opening declaration that you always find in this.
But those authors would take the discussions that you are engaged in as concluded, right? They say that's it. I mean, it's decided.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. That is why I think my book is useful. I think I see it as useful precisely because I present something that is usually seen as a static, as a very lively debate, and very lively debate, of course, because, well, in this field, it's, well, it would be very unusual to find a linear movement towards somewhere. Yeah, I don't expect that, of course. I don't expect about human nature. I don't expect about religion. I don't expect it about secularization. And so, yeah, I think it's I think it's a lazy attitude. But of course, laziness is part of our job because you have to start somewhere. You have to position, and so Matteo, well, can explain this very well, I think, because of course it's a matter. It's a sort of identity marker. Yes, you're part of the community. You know, was right or was wrong now in this precise moment, but my job was completely different. I wanna, as I said, I wanted to understand what was going on there, why people argue for this or argue against that, and it's so in my, it's been an anachronistic effort to do justice to so many different reasons. There I see something useful, and this utility, usefulness that I see as precisely to do with this desire to show that there is a lot of dynamism, theoretical dynamism, in the debate that we often don't appreciate as much as we should. Yeah. But Matteo maybe has something. Or well, it's late, of course. But if Matteo has something to say, I would be very glad to hear.
No, no, very quickly because it's late and I see one hand. But I would say I found that annoying too. But I think it's just like really I don't want to be unrespectful, but it's like a small cross on your necklace or something like that. It's like a symbol for saying, okay, I know where we are as a community or something like that. Of course, it's wrong. Of course, it's and as many symbols of membership, it's wrong because there was no theory of secularization properly defined before the change of paradigm. And now there are some theories, and these theories are stronger than the others. So, but the only thing that I would like to say is that that never closes a discourse. I mean, you never demonstrate in a ultimate way anything in science, and the point is bringing the debate ahead and remaking the terms of the debate itself. Okay, so if in the beginning you had this vague idea of a steady, continuous, and necessary decline of religion and blah blah blah, that changed somehow. The thesis changed somehow, and it became a much more complex thesis. It became something that had historical, local, temporal differences. The real question seen from 2022 is how crazy should be people in the 18th century to think they had found a theory of everything and predict a decline of anything for the rest of the story of humanity. That is the question, okay? But seen from our point of view, the theory of secularization has gotten very, very much more complicated, and the terms of the debate have changed a lot. That's why I was saying we should find a way to study the history of ideas and the history of philosophical or scientific or even religious ideas as, like a caravan that moves from one oasis to another. And in moving from one oasis to another, it changed the structure of the caravan itself while remaining more or less the same. So, yeah, I would say so.
I would say a very quick question because it's already 1:05 and unfortunately I have to transition toward another meeting. So Lucia, please.
Yes, thank you. I am wondering, is there any way to bring the notion or this condition of brotherhood in a post-secular city? So it is just a challenge. Thank you.
Well, of course, one of the true, genuine epistemic gain in the debate is, of course, it's the widening up of the horizon. So bringing in the decolonial perspective and provincializing Europe was a big change in our conversation, and just having the opportunity to, for example, to look at the colonial process entangled with the secularization process changes your understanding, of course, because seeing power where you used to see just progress, for example, as is a great epistemic gain, and of course, but then, as Matteo said, this doesn't mean that you reach a position where everything is clear. There is a sort of readjustment, general readjustment of the conversation, And then yeah, in a sense, you started new, of course, because then you have to relearn what secularity means, what progress means, what history means for this. So yeah, it's a very long and winding journey, and I think yes, brotherhood means a lot here, of course, because if you care about people who are affected by these historical changes, of course, there is a concern in what you do that is not just a scientific concern, it's an ethical concern. And I think it's part of our conversation. And that's another side of the issue, the political ethical side. There is a crisscrossing here. It's very complicated. So, for example, in my book, there is no much space for the political question of secularity, but it's there because I don't think that you can have a view of secularization, of secularity, a position about secularity, and a view of secularization that are completely separated one from the other. So yes, I think that brotherhood matters here, even though of course it's a normative, of course, notion. But yes, if religion is, if not universal, of course, is something that matters for the whole humankind, I think that brotherhood matters as well. Yes.
Thank you.
Bene, grazie molte. In cauda veneno non posso dire che i primi due fratelli della storia religiosa, diciamo, occidentale non è andata benissimo, ma speriamo che vada molto meglio in futuro. Vi ringrazio molto per queste presentazioni brillanti e per la partecipazione così ricca dei colleghi e poi insomma per lo scambio. Per chi ha letto già questi libri, come nel mio caso, è stato un riviverli e conoscerli molto meglio grazie a questa riflessione che ne ha espanso i confini. Quindi credo che sia un'operazione che dovremmo ripetere, quindi ecco, vi esorto Paolo, Deborah, a pubblicare presto nuovi libri e anche gli altri a fare altrettanto, perché è davvero un piacere ascoltarli.